Brock University acknowledges the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper-Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. Good morning, and welcome to this session of Business Breathers, a live webinar series hosted by Goodman Group at Brock University. My name is Abdul Rahimi, and it's my distinct pleasure to serve as the director of Goodman Group at Brock University. Goodman Group is a community-focused learning and development services provider that works to support professionals and businesses pursuing growth and excellence through professional development certificate programs, executive education, and consulting services. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome you all to today's session, and thank you to everyone who has already submitted your questions when you registered. And for those viewing live, feel free to put your questions into the chat section, which is open now. This webinar series aims to provide 45-minute breathers filled with insightful discussions on timely topics that are relevant to the businesses and everyday lives, led by award-winning Brock University faculty and leading industry experts, encouraging thoughtful debates. It gives me great pleasure to introduce today's guest speaker, my colleague and friend, Jason Sparaga. Jason is co-founder and managing partner of Ridjar Capital, a family office-style investment company with over 25 years of experience as an executive owner, investor, and advisor. Jason is an entrepreneur and deal maker at heart and focuses on opportunity sourcing, transaction structuring, and using his network and deal-making skills to help the portfolio of partners grow their businesses. Jason is also the co-founder and executive board chair at Spark Power. He was co-CEO at Spark Power from its inception in 2009 until 2021, leading strategy and driving aggressive growth, both organically and through acquisitions. After building the business from startup up to over 250 million of revenue, Jason recruited a strong professional management team and stood back into a board position, where he continues to lead the Spark corporate and acquisition strategy. Jason and his partners continue as majority shareholders of Spark Power. Prior to Spark, Jason co-founded and was CEO of Sparaga Capital Partners, a boutique private company investment and merchant bank, where he helped close more than 100 transactions. Jason also has been honored as the recipient of several awards, including the 2015 Goodman School of Business Distinguished Graduate Award, 2016 Canadian Business Excellence Award, and 2017 Entrepreneur of the Year finalist. As a strong advocate for community and charitable giving, Jason is passionate about supporting the autism cause through direct funding organizations such as Racing with Autism and Unity for Autism, where he is the chair of the board. Jason is also proud to have founded the annual Spark Power Play Challenge in support of Prostate Cancer Canada and to be a board member of Helping Hands Jamaica Foundation. As well, Jason is a graduate of Brock University's Goodman School of Business and holds a CPA designation. Jason, welcome. Good to have you here.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Can you tell us about your background and how you got started in the business world, Jason?
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile starting from my childhood. I really grew up with a family of entrepreneurs. My grandparents and my parents all had their own small businesses, convenience stores, hardware stores, etc. So I grew up under that, and then over time, my family moved into real estate as real estate agents, and so I grew up around the deal-making environment. Ultimately, got my my CPA designation, and so when you put those things together, it kind of produces a deal-making kind of entrepreneur with a finance background. And in terms of how I got started in the business world, I really, for 28 years, I've been a business owner and entrepreneur. I haven't worked for anybody else, I think, since I was 25, or if I did work for somebody else, it was a company that I owned and controlled. So really, it's kind of in my blood. At first, I got into entrepreneurship and business while I was still in university. I was actually between first and second year of university, and growing up in Niagara Falls, not far from here, there was a big tourist and bar and restaurant community. And I was fortunate to have the opportunity to apply for a small, I think it was the first year of the small business program that was launched by the provincial government, I believe it was, right, and administered through the Royal Bank.
Right.
And so we had to apply. It was an interest-free loan for the summer, and they were trying to springboard entrepreneurship, and I had the bug. And so I applied, and I started a flower business, and it was a flower business selling roses and carnations to people originally in the tourist area, on corners around the tourist area, and then ultimately migrated to selling them in bars and restaurants at night to patrons, and was very successful. I was able to repay the $3,000, I think it was, loan at the time within 5 weeks.
Wow.
Which was the fastest that they had seen, and I believe still have seen to date.
Right.
Well, you're supposed to pay it back, and hopefully pay it back in time so that there's not interest accrued. Ultimately, they forgave a lot of those loans because a lot of them just didn't get paid back. They were trying to spawn entrepreneurship. So pretty proud of that.
Nice.
And kind of took off from there. So that's how I got the bug and got into it. I finished my designation, my undergraduate, and then got back into the business community after that.
Wow. Very, very exciting start to the entrepreneurship world, selling roses. So that was while you were a student,
correct,
working here. When did you start having first batch of employees, perhaps?
Yeah, so that would have started about 4 or 5 years after I graduated. What I did immediately after graduating, I finished off my accounting designation. During that period, I was working for a couple of national accounting firms to get my designation. The day I qualified, I left, and I hung up my own shingle and started an advisory and investment banking business,
right,
which at the outset was me and really ultimately 1 or 2 other people, one of which continues to be my partner to this day, Eric Waxman. And we had originally a firm that was associated with an accounting firm, and within a couple of years we moved off and built it ourselves. So that would have been in the late 90s, 98, 99, 2000 that we departed from that environment. And we had Sparaga Capital Partners, as you were talking about in the intro, which was a mergers and acquisitions and corporate finance business that lasted it still technically exists today, but it ultimately became the M&A and corporate finance engine of Spark Power, which we'll talk about. And we probably at peak had 5, 6, 7 employees in that business. Okay. But it got us into the next round of entrepreneur growth that we set off on in and around 2008, 2009.
Now, I understand as part of your selling roses business, I guess flowers, you were so successful that the firm with which you were working with, they asked you to leave. And then you had to relocate to somewhere at Clifton Hill, perhaps, or somewhere else.
Oh, in the flower business? No, what I was referring to is that I had some employees that were selling, and they were making commissions selling the flowers, and they did so well that they decided to just start their own business, which is, in retrospect, actually pretty admirable, and I appreciate that as entrepreneurs. And they went off and did their own thing and were quite successful with it.
So you're able to inspire entrepreneurship from an early age.
That's probably a good way to look at it.
Yeah, fantastic. Of course, you've been involved in a number of successful startups and investments over the years. What do you think sets these companies apart from others that may not have been as successful?
I think what sets them apart is they are and have been driven by a tenacity and an entrepreneurship drive to succeed. I think at the end of the day, any small to medium-sized business that continues their journey, it's typically the difference is the tenacity and the spirit and the capability of the people at the end of the day.
Right.
And so you can have the best idea led by the wrong team or the wrong people with the wrong strategy, or you can have an average idea that ends up turning to be a great company and a great business because the people behind it have driven it there. So I think if I could pin it on one particular thing, it would be the people, and so I think Eric and I, when we met Andrew Clark, our third partner, and got into the Spark Power business in 2009, we recognized that the key was going to be to, build that on the backs of, an entrepreneurial spirit and drive, and to use our capabilities as deal makers to build those businesses. And so that's really how we started building Spark and got into the other businesses that we grew and built.
How did you come up with the name Spark? That's a pretty on point name.
Yeah. Well, Spark is actually originally the merger of my last name, Sparaga, and Andrew's last name, Clark. That's where Spark came from, and it was actually nothing to do with power.
Right.
At the time when we came together as partners, we were looking to spark the entrepreneurs and invest in early stage businesses, and so we had the Spark Fund originally, and we almost immediately pivoted into power because the Renewable Energy Act had come out here in Ontario, which got the solar and wind development business off the ground.
Yeah.
And so we seized on that as entrepreneurs and investors and started Spark, and it was originally Spark Solar, and we were developers first and foremost. So from 2010 to 2013, 2014, we focused on developing solar assets in conjunction with the farming community primarily in southwestern Ontario, and we built the largest renewable energy co-op in the province, in the country actually. And then we developed a few other assets and realized there was significant capital coming into the space, so we decided to sell those assets and monetize that, and then get into the bit broader power sector, which was around 2014 we started that. So in 2014, with the capital that we had gained from the sale of those assets, we started acquiring businesses that were in the service maintenance business, first in renewable energy, so solar, wind, primarily, and then ultimately in low, medium, high voltage space for electrical. Ultimately bought also a company called Bullfrog Power, and once we had assembled a good group of companies in Ontario, we moved out of Ontario to Western Canada and then into the United States. And that kind of took place primarily over 2015, 16, 17, through to 2019 was our last acquisition. We did 13 of them and grew from 5 or 6 of us developing assets in 2010 to, I think there's about 1,300 employees today in Spark Power across North America. So that was the Spark Power journey. But it all started with Sparaga and Clark merging together to form the word Spark and spawning entrepreneurship.
I guess the writing was on the wall once you had Spark together to create the company.
Yeah, it did. We joked about that at the time, like how odd and synchronous it was to have the name and to be going into the space, but really it was about seizing on the entrepreneurial opportunity.
So on that point, so this is 2009 or earlier, and of course in 2023, where we are today, the renewable energy and solar and wind and all these other sources of renewable energy in North America is pretty profound. It's been here for a long time now. But back then it wasn't here.
Correct.
You were one of the first that started and got into this space. How did you get into this space specifically? I guess just give us some what were some of the insights and thoughts, and how can our students who are looking into getting their own businesses and starting their own businesses could perhaps leverage from some of those lessons as well?
I think for us it was about we're I would say deal making background, opportunistic entrepreneurs. So what drives us is seizing on an opportunity where you see a nascent industry that's got a big market, that you can see possibly in other jurisdictions has already kind of taken off. So with the renewable energy market, you could easily at 2009, 2010 look to the European market and see what had happened there, knowing that they're a number of years, if not a decade ahead of North America in terms of how they were adopting renewable energy. So we could see the opportunity and then parlay that into whatever the local opportunity was. It was near to us. We understood it. We looked at the program that they put out, and we saw that if you were willing to do the work, make the effort, without a lot of money, you could get into the space. It was a lot of effort. We had to go and sign option agreements and create management agreements and contracts to seize on the opportunity, but it was there, and a whole bunch of entrepreneurs rushed into the market at the time, and we were one of, I'll say, a dozen or so companies that I think that parlayed that into bigger success.
Right.
And similarly, what we did in renewable energy, we've done in a number of other spaces. So we kind of learned from our own successes and failures, because no entrepreneurial business journey is linear and upwards and to the right. There's all sorts of things that happen along the way. And so we took the lessons learned and we repeated that while we were building Spark. On the side, we got into the marijuana business when it first came out. We've since got into the crypto business, again, kind of at the bleeding edge of both of those industries.
Right.
And then once they got to a place where our developer deal-making opportunistic skills were no longer the big competitive advantage, we looked to exit and sell those businesses.
Those are all, pretty novel industries. So solar industry or renewable energies, medical marijuana, cryptocurrencies, right? So these are all, at the time when you started with these, they were not household names.
Right.
What are some of the insights or strategies that you use that gets you
excited about?
Gets you excited, but also sets you apart from being able to pick up on these early trends, or what is the secret to finding success early, or spotting these patterns early?
Yeah, so all three of those industries, well, at the time that we were looking at them and got into them, they were kind of early days, almost bleeding edge. All three of them shared a few commonalities, right? One was massive industries and marketplaces. Number two, no dominant player in our local market. Number three, lots of tailwind. You could see it happening, looking at other jurisdictions and basically culturally where things were headed. And number four, if you modeled it out financially, you could see there was large profits to be made, at least for a reasonable enough time that you could make a success out of it before potentially the large institutional capital came in. And again, in all three of those industries, early days, large institutions tend to take a back seat and watch what happens. In fact, in all three cases, the dominant institutions in Canada anyways, and still to today, are reluctant to participate fully.
Right.
So trying to get bank accounts set up and trading accounts set up in both the medical marijuana business or the Bitcoin and crypto business was and still remains a difficult task. Regulation remains murky.
Right.
And so it's really a marketplace full of entrepreneurs, in particular early on. And so we can compete and win in those markets versus having to compete with gigantic organizations coming in. And in the renewable energy case, even there early on, people domestically were not participating. If anything, it was European groups that were coming in or US groups that were coming in. And we had a competitive advantage because we were here. So all of them shared this commonality. And I think that's, if I had to frame up how we look at opportunities, we want to see that we have a number of competitive advantages early on and for long enough that we can make a difference and be profitable.
What would be a typical streaks of competitive advantages that you would say? There's probably a rule of thumb that you probably follow when you say, you know, I like that industry. There's a big market size in there that we can go. Not enough of the traditional big players in this place, and it can probably last, or we can probably last in this place 5, 10, whatever years that it is that we can have. What are some of those advice pieces or rules of thumb that you follow when you go about investing in opportunities, which then our students can perhaps learn from that as well?
Yeah, so I'd say a few things, and I think we can take some lessons from how we morphed and transitioned the Spark business from a development business to a service and maintenance business. We saw the writing on the wall in the Spark solar business, the development business, in and around, we had gotten into it 2010, in and around 2012, 2013, we started to see big, deep-pocketed institutions, pension funds, insurance companies, et cetera, coming into the market. Valuations were getting driven up, which means the cost of capital is falling dramatically. And so we weren't going to be able to compete in that.
Right.
We didn't have any competitive advantage. In fact, we were at a significant disadvantage. That's why we decided to sell. We actually tried to acquire more assets, and the prices were so astronomical, we decided, no, we're going to sell. But we saw this very large power space right beside us, in front of us.
Right.
We had these people servicing, maintaining, and building all of these assets and the electrical infrastructure. And so as we investigated it, we said, hey, is there an opportunity for us to seize there? Can we create a competitive advantage? And for us, the competitive advantage was there was a very fragmented industry full of what they call typically mom and pop organizations,
right.
5 and 10 person shops that were providing electrical or renewable energy services or high voltage services or what have you. Thousands of these shops across North America. And then you had the tailwinds of the electrification of everything. And we could see that coming. And with you throw renewable energy and ESG into the mix, and we went, you know, we can have we can see our path to building and growing and using our skill sets as M&A professionals, as deal-making experts, and as finance experts to be able to consolidate an industry and build it. And that's what we did, and that's how we built Spark. And I think the important lesson there for others is it's important to look at the market and the opportunity, but also look at your own skills and your abilities and try to find a match where you can actually create value and maintain a competitive advantage through a long enough period of time. So
looking at the landscape now in the post-COVID world, and obviously there's a lot of, so landscape today perhaps looks significantly different for a number of reasons, not just COVID, you know, whether it's artificial intelligence or any other of those elements. What do you think are some of the exciting opportunities for entrepreneurs in investing in the current landscape?
Yes, I would actually say that today, well, a lot of people are like, yeah, the world has gone to a crazy place, and there's all this instability and uncertainty. For an entrepreneur, that is actually good, because if everything's kind of nice and easy and everybody's nailing it out of the park,
right?
I think where you end up with as an entrepreneur, and I will differentiate from an entrepreneur from a venture capitalist or a large institutional corporation in the capitalist world. An entrepreneur looks for, I'll say, almost dysfunctional environments and situations within a large, fast-growing, early days market and seizes on that. And so today, AI, fintech, healthcare.
Yep.
I think you could name pretty much every major industry right now: electrification, automotive, communications. Every single one of them is going through this massive transition, and it's mostly being driven by rapid development in technology, right? And so what people did for a living is changing, how they work is changing, everything.
Right.
There are so many opportunities that are presenting themselves. And I think, for example, crypto and fintech and AI in particular, those markets and those places, it's not about whether that's happening or whether that's, it is, like, it's undeniable. Electrification, it's undeniable. How do you seize on the opportunities early days? And young people in particular have a competitive advantage, and that is their youth and their energy, right? Use that to your advantage, because us old guys are starting to get tired, and we're starting to drift out of that competitive mindset and more into what's my legacy, what's my future. And now you're in a unique opportunity. Don't be afraid, just go for it.
Entrepreneurship is synonymous with risk-taking. And to be successful, you would have had to take a decrease, some risk. And with the faster pace of technology and development, what that also means is faster rates of failures as well as success. So how do you approach risk when making investment decisions, and what criteria do you typically use to evaluate potential opportunities?
So me personally, I put risk aside, and I'm an entrepreneur. I think entrepreneurs, if you're truly an entrepreneur, you don't do risk return calculations. Okay, that's not something that you do success failure calculations.
All right.
And maybe that's not great for your family and the people that rely on you. But I think if you're being honest with yourself, if you're truly an entrepreneur, it's in your blood. It's genetic. It's not somebody who puts in front of you, here's the risk model for entrepreneurship. And you're not driven, this is going to sound ironic, but you're not driven by the capital accumulation. You're driven by being in it. It's like pro athletes. They're driven to play because they want to play and they want to compete. Ultimately there's a prize, hopefully, a trophy, but often those things, even pro athletes will say, pretty anticlimactic, ironically, after the fact. You're kind of like, okay, now what? And so as an entrepreneur, you're really driven by just being in that and getting businesses and ideas off the ground and seeing things grow and all that kind of stuff. And then the rest of it kind of comes as the I'll say the spoils of your efforts, right?
And so, you touched on this a little bit earlier about the youth and the energy and us older guys, perhaps. So you've, I'm putting myself in that same category in there. So, you've achieved a great deal of success in a number of industries that you've been with, be it spark power or medical marijuana or cryptos. How do you keep yourself motivated beyond a certain amount? For some, it may be that that's money, but, as the energy levels dwindle, perhaps, what's your spark that keeps you going?
I will go back to if it's in your blood genetically, you're almost I feel predisposed to being an entrepreneur. I enjoy it. I enjoy being in it. And I have done this where I've extracted myself out of that for a period of time, especially as I transitioned out of the Spark CEO role. There's part of it that feels like it's missing,
right? But
I'm starting to miss it a little less, if that's a good way of explaining it, as I'm getting older, and I'm starting to focus on some of the additional things that I should as I'm getting older. My family, my traveling, helping and mentor other people to grow and build their careers. And just generally charity, the other things in my life, but I do still have that drive and interest in entrepreneurship. I'm just going to take a little bit of a different approach to it. It's going to be more focused on investing in others, if you will,
right?
Versus only doing the work and rolling up my sleeves all the time to do it myself.
Mm-hmm. So you're involved in, so through investing in others, and you're also involved in a number of charities and charitable foundations. And I suspect that's an important part of who you are and what you do. Tell us a little bit more about that side of your work and how you got involved in those.
Yeah, well, so the primary charities that I'm involved in, Unity for Autism is one. And I got involved in the autism cause. Our son is on the spectrum, and so early on, as we were exploring what that meant to us and to others in the world, I came across an organization, Unity for Autism, that was led by a great lady, Kathy, who I really appreciated what she was building, and I wanted to get involved in that. I think that organization fits well with who I am, because it's about funding grassroots needs. It's not a large mega charity that has big administration and has less than 2% of its dollars that go to administrating. Everything goes to grassroots, other grassroots organizations that are helping people on a day-to-day basis with the autism cause and their needs. And that's similar to Helping Hands Jamaica. It's a very grassroots organization that I got involved in that is helping youth primarily in Jamaica and helping them evolve and develop, get into colleges and schools and develop in their athletics and helping them through their early years. And so to me, the ties that bind with any charity that I'm going to be involved in, it's going to be very driven to the individual's needs on a day-to-day basis, as opposed to funding research and development or larger international causes, which are all very important. It's just not, doesn't quite align with my personal personality and objectives.
Thank you. As the CEO of Spark Power, you also initiated the Cancer Run charity as well.
Oh, the Power Play Challenge?
The Power Play Challenge,
yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, that was that's a hockey-based initiative. And so for 8 years, it's been a few years since we've done that. Spark may reinvigorate that initiative, but I became good friends with with Adam Graves, who's a famous Stanley Cup champ hockey player, and he's an Oakville guy. I'm a Burlington guy, and so together we've done a few different charitable things. He continues forward with an organization called Smile Zone, which is about which uses hockey to raise capital to then fund children's play zones and long-term care environments, et cetera. And so I'm really focused there with the hockey thing, which is something that I grew up doing.
Yeah.
And the Spark Power Play Challenge, while I was leading Spark, I think we had 8 of them, and it was about funding prostate cancer support and research through Prostate Cancer Canada.
Yeah, one of the really worthy causes there.
Yeah.
In thinking about, so your work and involvement in charities in Jamaica, and so sort of, taking the international aspect here, the youth here in Canada versus those in Jamaica and other parts of the world, what are some of the similarities are you seeing between the opportunities that they could be getting involved with and what are some of the common trends around those pieces?
Well, first of all, the one thing I've noticed as I've gone to different places around the world and talked with young people is that entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs. It doesn't matter what language you speak, what country you're from, what your background is. An entrepreneur is an entrepreneur. And so it's about what in their local environment, if that's where they're participating, is an opportunity versus maybe other parts of the world. So renewable energy at the time that we got into it might have been a great opportunity here. It might not have been if it was in a Caribbean nation or a European nation, similar to the marijuana space, similar to the crypto space, right? And so I think it's important to this is outside of the charity thing. If we're focused on what an entrepreneur needs to do, regardless of their environment, I think it's about seizing on the opportunities and using your skills to parlay that into a business.
We do have a question from one of our students who is asking, what advice would you give to someone who's just starting out in business or looking to make their first investment?
I think it would be to reflect on what makes you tick and what you really enjoy. Because if you do something that you don't enjoy, or you get into a business that you just either it's not passionate for you, or it doesn't speak to you and who you are, then the money won't matter. Because if you're truly an entrepreneur, it'll eat at you that it's not something that you enjoy. You'll eventually, in my view, fail or not enjoy the success. And so I think it's really important that you think about who you are and what's important to you. In terms of looking for where there's opportunities to seize on, I think naturally you are, especially if you're at a university or college, you should be right in the forefront of that. In fact, I think a lot of people outside of universities and college would want to come to talk to you to say, what is happening? Right. Because if it's happening here and it's new and it's exciting, it's probably not there yet in the broader market sense. Right. And so try to find those things or those industries or their spaces that are leading the charge that maybe others haven't really seized on yet because they're not out there.
Interesting. You've been an entrepreneur for a number of years, well, decades, actually. You probably have some more favorite parts some parts that stand out more for you than others. What are some of your favorite or standout memories of being an entrepreneur?
So if I'm answering the question, what are my favorite parts about being an entrepreneur, I would say it's about having the freedom to explore opportunities and seize on them, and having the opportunity to succeed or fail, and build something out of nothing, to create and to build something. I guess it's a business person's form of art, right? Because entrepreneurship, I think, is an art form of the business world. You have to take different parts and try to assemble them into some sort of image and vision, and then translate that for people and to help build and lead to create a vision that people will want to get behind and grow a business. Right. I think if you're asking a question, what are some of the experiences I've had as an entrepreneur that I've enjoyed? I think some of the biggest ones involve seeing other people make gains that probably wouldn't have otherwise made those gains if they were in a larger corporate setting. So as we were building Spark, for example, I believe we had about a dozen people that we brought onto the team early days that ultimately walked away with some pretty decent capital, and handing those checks over and seeing the faces and knowing that made a huge difference to those people's lives was pretty cool.
Nice. You're probably not one sitting on your hands. As an entrepreneur, being a way of life, you probably have a few things that you're perhaps working on, or maybe early stages, or perhaps further along. Sort of pulling the curtains back a little bit on some of those items. What are some of the exciting projects that you currently have on hand or looking to get into?
So I mentioned the crypto space. My partners and I had invested in a business through the last round of growth of the Bitcoin and crypto space, a company called Ledden, which is a crypto lending platform that was started by a couple of young entrepreneurs that we knew that came to us looking for an investment. Right. We invested behind them, and it grew, and it has been very successful for them, and it was successful for us. That gave us a taste for the crypto and fintech space, and actually got us to wanting to use our energy and power background to get into the crypto mining space. Wow. And so we, rather than start being a miner ourselves, we created a hosting organization. Basically, we host other miners, and we built a crypto mine. I can't say exactly where it is, but it's not far from here. And we host 6,400 computers, 20 megawatt site. And so we're managing that. We actually own the majority of it, but we have some venture capital partners in that business. And spending a lot of time on that, spending a bunch of time still from a board level around some of the Spark stuff. And then looking for continued opportunity in and around the electrification, energy, future of power space, because it's such a big space and we have a lot of background, and naturally we have a lot of people coming to us with ideas. So we're exploring kind of anything that intersects with electrical and power, I think for us is exciting. Anything that has the development phase in front of it, early days, where we can get ahead of the pack and be part of that, we're interested in, and that's where we're focused on our time.
Would you say one of your competitive advantages, if you will, or one of the sort of niches that you're into is being able to spot that trend early?
Yeah, I think that's me and my partners. I think we have a unique combination and a balance of views where we can call each other out, throw ideas on the table.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people coming at us, both as a group and as individuals, where we can share those ideas and then spot something and go, yeah, that meets kind of the 5 or 6 criteria for a good opportunity, and then try to seize on it. And the biggest one, because we're not going to run those businesses going forward, is just make sure the people or persons you're backing, you think have the tenacity for what it takes to see it through on a daily basis, and the stamina to stay the course regardless of what comes, because you're going to succeed, but you're also going to fail along the way.
How do you take those failures with the successes?
I think you learn over time, if I'm being honest. The early first few failures, you think, wow, this is never going to work. It's horrible.
Right.
I can't believe I've wasted all this time.
Right.
And then as you've gone through 30 of those, 50 of those, you realize we've developed an expression, things aren't ever as good or as bad as you think they are.
Right.
And you need to learn how to stay the course. And more importantly, you need to actually embrace and learn from your fail fast and cheap is the key. Failing catastrophically all the time, you're probably not destined to be an entrepreneur. You probably should take that as a lesson to, if you're constantly striking out, you're probably not a major league batter, right?
Right.
So.
Yeah, fair enough. Perhaps time for one more question in here. What do you see as your ultimate goal or legacy in the business world, or otherwise?
I think where I'm focused on today is about what's good for people and good for the planet. I think my generation, our generation, has been pretty fortunate. We've lived through, I was born in 1970, so I didn't see a lot of the terrible stuff that happened in the first half of the 1900s. And I think that our next generation, our kids and our grandkids, have a different challenge ahead of them.
Right.
And so if I can help our generation maybe atone for some of its sins, because we've had it pretty good.
Right.
And help them find a way to build and grow businesses and think and act more responsibly, more democratically, more cooperatively, and develop things that actually are not only good for and fun for people to do, but also maintain the planet and their surroundings. I think that's a huge win. So that's where I'm focused.
Fantastic. Well, Jason, thank you very much for taking the time and being here and answering questions and speaking to our students, and also the network of professionals who are here as well. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for having me. And
the Goodman Group is a community-focused learning and development services provider that works to support professionals and businesses, businesses who are pursuing growth and excellence through professional development certificate programs, executive education, and consulting services. Goodman Group is pleased to share with you the latest offerings, which you can see on the screen momentarily. The program that we have going on, that we have coming up over the coming term is our, one of our 2 programs is Nonprofit Leadership Certificate Program, which are offered on Mondays and Wednesdays starting in late May and going through June. And they are offered in a hybrid format of in-person or online for all the instructor-led sessions. The registration information and details are available online here. And for any questions related to this, please feel free to connect with the team. As well, the Healthcare Business Executive Management Certificate Program is being offered through June and July. As well, this is also offered in a hybrid format for the instructor-led sessions. And for information, please reach out to the team as has been shown. Well, that is all that we have time for this session of Business Breathers. Thank you for all of you who joined us. Thanks again, Jason, for giving us the benefit of your wisdom and the time for being here. We will be taking a break over the summer months, and we will be returning back in September for those of you who are joining us on a regular basis. Until then, stay safe and have a wonderful summer.